All right, we are back for another episode of Summer Showcase Northern Lights. I'm joined by my trusty co-host, Michael Washington. Michael, how you doing tonight?
Good, my man. Good. Ready to talk some CFL action, that's for sure.
No doubt. In fact, normally we would start on our review of last week, but since the game just ended, I feel like it makes sense for us to start, on the Toronto and Montreal game, which just wrapped up. Real quick, obviously, right off the cuff, your thought process, your feelings after the game, given that Toronto kind of handedly beat Montreal.
Yeah, so now that I think about it, we didn't do a show last week, so we didn't get our predictions in, but I probably would have predicted Toronto to win this game. I just feel like Cameron Dukes had a rough week the week before, and it just was going to be one of those things where it's going to be a typical trap game. And Montreal, for as good as they have been susceptible to certain things, and one of those things is a quarterback that's able to move and extend plays. And Cameron Dukes is really good at that. So I think that might be somewhat of a formula for some of these teams down the stretch to try to stop this juggernaut of Alouettes team. I'm sure Montreal will end up adjusting, down the stretch because they are really well coached and they are one of the better teams in the league. They didn't win the Grey Cup last year for no reason, right? Like it's just the way that it is. Cody Fajardo is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and when you take a look at Toronto, there was a lot of talk about the fall off with Winnipeg. I don't think we've seen the fall off with Toronto as much. Like, yeah, it hasn't been as dominant per se as it had been last year, or as strong, but they're still finding ways to win games. And Cameron Dukes has played well enough that I think it's going to be scary for the team, for the leagues moving forward, and the teams that have to play this team if they hit their stride. Uh, if Chad Kelly is the incumbent starter when he comes back.
Yeah, and I think by all indications, Kelly's going to walk right back into that starting job, especially with that big old extension he signed this offseason.
Yep.
It's going to be interesting to see exactly where they're standing when Kelly does come back, because honestly, they could be in a really good shape when he returns, and then just go on a pretty devastating run at the end of the season there with him coming back. So it could prove to be a really interesting situation there for Toronto. But I like what you said about what they did with Cameron Dukes this week. I think you touched on it briefly. They didn't ask him to, single-handedly beat Montreal tonight. It wasn't all him. They did use him in the run game quite a bit, which was obviously very, very important in this win. If you look here, he ran 9 times, 46 yards. It obviously added up quick. Kadeem Carey also did his part, but they weren't asking him to take a lot of shots downfield. Obviously you see right there, he averaged 6.6 yards per attempt. So, it showed early and often. They were allowing him to move the pocket, get away from the pass rush, and take whatever the defense gave him all game long. And realistically, I think that's the formula you have to use with Dukes. And I'm not saying that he's not talented enough to take over some games. I just don't think he's at that point in his CFL career quite yet. Give him some more time to, kind of develop and learn the game and learn the offense. And maybe he gets there. But realistically, that's not what he's in Toronto for. He's here to keep the seat warm until Kelly comes back. And then hopefully Kelly can come in and really take over games like he did last season when he was a MLP candidate.
I think as much as this is a formula for using Dukes in this manner, I think it's a formula for actually how you have to beat the Alouettes too, right? Like 16 for 20, that's very high efficient numbers, not a lot of deep shots down the field, but his long was 29. So it's not like it was like a long of 12. His long was 29. So he did get it down the field. That might have been a run after catch for whatever, but either way, it still was able to stretch the field enough, right? Like the Alouettes are one of those teams that you need to be efficient with ball control, like no turnovers. That's awesome for Dukes, at least in interception wise. And that's the key component to beating this Montreal team. So this may be the blueprint for teams moving forward in that manner on how to beat this Montreal team. That's just the way that I look at it. I know they got a huge game from Janorian Grant. I think he had over 240 yards at one point in time total. Special teams, I think it was. Maybe it was over 250 by the time it was all said and done. But special teams play was a huge part of this, and game script plays a factor into it as well, right? Like 20 attempts, they didn't ask him to beat him because they didn't need to, right? Because Janarian Grant was sensational in the special teams game. So I think that overall it was just a good game plan for Toronto, and they showed why that they're still one of the top teams in this league, even though it's been kind of underwhelming, I guess, till this point in the season.
Absolutely, and it's kind of funny coming into this game. Obviously, we talked about it briefly. We didn't have an episode last week. We had planned on having an episode originally, just so everybody's aware. So I had topics prepared, and one of the topics prepared after last week's game was what should Toronto do at quarterback? Well, they started Cameron Dukes in this game. That we didn't see any other passers get in there, not Brian Scott or Nick Arbuckle. With that thought in mind, do you think Cameron Dukes is the guy going forward? Until Kelly returns.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you make a change. It's one of those situations where I'm sure that there's probably some Argos fans that may have been calling for Dukes, and even after this performance, they may look at the stat line if they're just box score watchers and they're not actually game watchers. They may look at it and go, "Oh, this guy is just not good enough." But 16 for 20 is efficient, no turnovers. You don't need to ask for much more from your guy. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to make sure you have a guy who can move the ball down the field and not turn the ball over. I mean, Trent Dilfer and Brad Johnson both won Super Bowls by basically being that, right? Smart quarterbacks that didn't need to turn the ball over. They relied on their defense. They relied within the system. Dukes is just capable of maneuvering around and extending plays. And I think Dukes is talented enough that if he continues to grow, the ceiling is high enough that he could be a starter in this league. So it's not like you're just throwing out a untalented, I don't want to say untalented, but a lesser talented guy and trying to tell him to play within the system. They still let him go out there and kind of improvise a little bit. Maybe part of it's himself because he does have a tendency to hold on the ball too long sometimes. But overall, the fact that they allow him to go play, it tells me that there is some untapped potential here for him in this league as a future starter somewhere, especially where if you take a look at the average age for these quarterbacks, a lot of them are older, and Dukes is still in his 20s. So I think you stick with him. You just continue to let him play within the system, maybe let him improvise once in a while, and just continue to let him grow, because there is a ceiling there that is high enough for him to be a starter in this league.
Absolutely, and I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Cameron Dukes is still very young, and a lot of the quarterbacks that you see finding success in the CFL are older quarterbacks. I mean, we talked about the fact that Trey Ford hasn't really gotten an opportunity in Edmonton, and we've discussed why. He is a younger quarterback. Sometimes is ill prepared for the task at hand. And speaking of younger quarterbacks who stepped in and didn't look that great, Caleb Evans, he's played before. He was the starter for Ottawa prior to joining Montreal. And I mean, I don't want to say he looked terrible, because obviously he was forced into a rough situation where the defense already kind of had some momentum, but he did throw 2 interceptions, one of which was returned for a touchdown. So, when you look at it from that aspect, what did Cameron Dukes do that Caleb Evans didn't do? He protected the ball. He didn't put his offense in bad positions. Other than that fumble, that was obviously very key. But at the same time, it didn't turn into a huge game-wrecking, decision for his team, or not a decision, but a play for his team. So definitely interesting to see how this game came about. I picked Montreal. And actually, everybody in our CFL News Hub pick'em picked Montreal this week. So every one of us got it wrong, which I thought was funny. So kind of interesting to look back on it. But hey, Toronto, I think, is maybe a better team than a lot of us are giving them credit for right now.
Well, it's a statement win. I mean, at the end of the day, it's basically saying, hey, Montreal, we respect everything that you did. We respect what you've done. But guess what? It's a new year. And basically it was like, yeah, we've been underwhelming, but guess what? We can still do this. So, and I think one of the things with Caleb, like you take a look at, the statistics for that game today, like I think the biggest thing was I feel like Montreal just got away from their game plan. Like Walter Fletcher only touched the ball 5 times rushing wise. And he led them in carries. So it's like, that's not what you want for a guy like Fletcher, right? Because Fletcher is very dynamic. He's a guy who can open up a game very, very quickly. And you just letting him touch the ball 5 times in the run game is just, it's never going to be efficient enough. And I know the CFL isn't very run happy and it's not very run heavy because it's only 3 downs and et cetera, et cetera. But the key teams that have the success are the teams that are able to run the ball between that 15 to 19 range for 85 to 95 yards. Like they don't, and maybe occasionally you get the super big ones that are like 130 yards or whatever, but those are the teams that are the most successful, is being able to not be one dimensional. And I feel like having a backup quarterback in there, even though he did throw 2 touchdowns, he averaged even less yards per pass at 5.8 than Dukes did. And you still didn't try to alleviate that in the run game. So you put all that pressure on a backup quarterback, and he just didn't respond.
Completely fair. Completely fair. So I don't want to look back at Toronto's last game too much, obviously, even though it was just Saskatchewan's most recent game. But it did bring up a topic that I believe that we need to touch on, and something that should be gaining some steam here very quickly, and is Corey Mace the favorite for Coach of the Year right now?
Yes. I mean, there's nobody else. I mean, you can take a look at the teams around the league and say whatever you want, but if Corey Mace is not your lead guy as head coach of the year at this point in time, you're not paying attention. Plain and simple. Like you're just not, because this team is rallying. And I mentioned it after week 1 that if this team continues to buy into Corey Mace as the head coach and continues to thrive and gel and can avoid any major injuries, that this team is gonna go places. Now Trevor Harris got hurt, but guess what? They're still winning even with the backup quarterback. So it just, there's no way to take a look at the Saskatchewan team and go, yeah, this team is without a doubt or the coach is without a doubt not worth being the front runner. Right? They beat Toronto 30-23, but if you take a look at the box score across the board, it was 10-9 at halftime, and then they just didn't relinquish anything in the second half. And that's where the defense has been really strong for Saskatchewan all year long. Shea Patterson steps in, and boom, you're still winning games. So if he's not your front runner, then I want to know what Kool-Aid you're drinking or what you're smoking, and can I get some? Because there's no other candidate at this particular moment in time that I would even put close to him. Right now, he's in the stratosphere by himself.
Well, I would suggest one other candidate, but he's not. I wouldn't say he's my favorite right now. But what about Ryan Dinwiddie? Especially with the job that he's been able to do with Cameron Dukes, who we've mentioned is very young.
I say yes, but then you're talking about Toronto. They're expected to be there. They've been there, and it's been underwhelming. Like, not underwhelming to a point where they're losing games. Not underwhelming to a point where it's not, on the flip side, impressive what he's been doing with a young quarterback. It's just the rest of the team is just really good. So, like, they're a really well-balanced team. When Chad Kelly comes back, and it's a huge difference, or hypothetically speaking, it should be a huge difference in quarterback play. Is it really the coach, or is it just, you know what I mean? Like, so it's again playing within a system, right? The system has always been there for Dinwiddie. I think Dinwiddie is a great coach. Don't get me wrong, but this isn't the situation. Nobody expected Saskatchewan to be here. Like, if there was one person out there who thought Saskatchewan was going to be where they are, the only person that thought that, and I can guarantee it, is right there on our screen, and his name is Corey Mace. He's the only one, I guarantee you, who believed enough in this team to be where they are at this point in time. Now, obviously, this is really early, and things will change as the season goes on. But yeah, it's a to me, it's Corey Mason and everybody else right now.
That's fair, and I would completely agree. And I would even go one step further and say, look at how he won this game. You know, it wasn't on the strength of his offense. It wasn't on the strength of a great quarterback, like you mentioned. Trevor Harris is hurt. It was his defense. 4 interceptions, 2 sacks, a forced fumble. One of those interceptions went back for a touchdown, and that touchdown ended up changing the game in Saskatchewan's favor. So, you know, when you look at the bigger picture, Corey Mace is a defensive mind. I mean, he's putting his stamp on the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and I think, yes, as of right now, again, we're only 5 weeks into the season so far, or 5 games into the season so far. I think that, yeah, he's got to be your favorite. You know, is Dinwiddie there in my mind? Yeah, I think he's your close second. Maybe not close second, but he's your second. And I think, you know, depending on what happens the rest of the way, maybe that kind of balances out a little bit more as we go. But, you know, Saskatchewan has a really big test this weekend that could immediately answer a lot of questions for a lot of people, I think. You know, if they go out there and beat BC, he has to be the favorite at that point. There's no questions about it.
Well, you know, going back to that Toronto game, the last game that Saskatchewan played with Toronto, like that's been the formula for Saskatchewan's wins, right? They hang tough in the first half, and in the second half, that defense just takes over. Something about the second half, it's the adjustments. I don't think we've seen a more well-coached team when it comes to second half adjustments than the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and especially on the defensive side of the ball. And that right there tells me that he's coaching at a higher level than I think people really honestly realize for his first year as a head coach. Actually, I think this is his first head coaching job ever. So it's just mind blowing to me. And that's why I say I don't think the race is close right now. Dinwiddie, obviously, I would agree would be second in that race, but I think it's his own stratosphere. I don't think it's close.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I have a hard time arguing against that. But again, you know, we could feel completely different by next week if they come in and get blown out by BC. Although I have a hard time believing that BC is going to blow them out. You know, they could win, but we shall see. But moving on to...
Is this a rematch from week 1? No. Saskatchewan played Edmonton week 1. Never mind. For some reason, I thought they played BC week 1, but they played Edmonton, I remember.
Shoot, I was going to say, you're asking me to remember things that I have no mental capacity for. I would have to go back and look, to be honest. But we're going to go back on to the next game of the weekend was Winnipeg versus Ottawa. And as you can see, Winnipeg found some momentum finally. They were able to come out of this one with a victory. Drew Brown got hurt on what I believe was a late hit, or at least an ill-advised hit, to say the least. You know, and ultimately exited the game. Dustin Crum finished out the game. I think this was precautionary primarily. They were just trying to be safe. You know, anytime it's a head injury, you don't want to take chances. So he ended up just, you know, sitting out the rest of the game. It does look like he will be the guy heading into next week, though. So that was one of our topics for this week as well, which Drew Brown was hurt on a late hit. So I wanted to kind of open up there. I mean, what do you think about the job that Dustin Crum came in and did, you know, in that limited time there?
I think it's just a more of a testament to why Crum is better suited to be a backup in this league than a starter. I know that sounds rough because last year was his first year, but it kind of happened last year too. Remember, he came in, nobody really knew much about him. There was some Dustin Crum magic, and Ottawa kind of went on a small little streak there, and then promptly ended up losing a ton of games. Right, like it was just loss after loss with him as a starter. So I think that's more of a testament to that Crum is suited to be exactly where he is. Now, does that to say that he can't get to a starting role in this league? No, it's just right at this moment, with his age and being younger, another one of those younger guys. It's probably better suited for him to be ready on a moment's notice to come in and take over for the starter. That's essentially where it comes from. It's great news that Drew Brown practiced today for Ottawa in full, and it's going to be most likely a full go. They need to continue to rely or lean on Reichwell Armstead, though. That's going to be the bread and butter of this team if they are going to want to win, because the play action is going to open up a lot, and Justin Hardy has already done a ton of damage in the past game with this team off of play action. And that's a key component in this situation. Is Hardy was a play action guy, not necessarily in college per se, but when he was asked to do it during the preseason in the NFL, a lot of it came off of the play action. So that's what they're going to need to rely on if they're going to want to get this offense rolling, for sure.
No, I completely agree. I mean, obviously, you see them having some success so far this season. I really honestly believe personally that, it's because of Reichwell Armstead, which is surprising to me. I was very critical of the move to only carry 2 backs into the season on the active roster. I know they had Kylan Hill on the practice roster, but, they carried Amilcar Polk and Reichwell Armstead, and Armstead had a pretty terrible preseason performance. And I know it was limited, and they were probably being very vanilla with him on purpose, but I had never expected him to come out and quite play this way. But, I mean, with that being said, I mean, if you're Redblacks, run the rock. Run the rock. I mean, there's nothing. You really have to continue to give Reichwell Armstead the ball, and his nickname is Rock for anybody who's watched the Redblacks games. They've been saying that left and right. So, I mean, it's one of those things where they've been very creative in the run game, but I think the more creative you get, it's fine, add those wrinkles in, but you cannot do that at the expense of carries to Armstead. So, with that being said, if you want to run the ball like they did in this game almost 30 times, go for it. Just make sure that, 15, 20 of those are going to Reichwell Armstead and he can get on a roll, because when he does, he's obviously very dangerous, and so far he's been very impressive.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things that sets this team apart from some of the other teams in this league, is because they can rely on that run game to really make a huge difference. I mean, I know this league isn't very run heavy, but you take a look at the statistics right here for Winnipeg. Brady Oliveira had a huge game and they win this game, right? It's the same thing with Ottawa, that they need to focus on using that and leaning on that as well. I mean, Winnipeg ran all over Ottawa. So Ottawa's also going to need to find a way to shore up that defense, right? Especially in the run game. What is that, 36 carries for 8 carry the 1-0, 208 yards. So, it's that's a pretty significant, take for a team that spent a lot of money on defense, right, from an Ottawa perspective in the offseason.
No, you're not wrong. We went out and got our Darius Pickett and, brought in a couple other guys, and we did lose some guys, obviously, but, that is one thing that we were talking about during the game. They are very susceptible to the run right now, specifically the quarterback run. I mean, you look right there, Chris Streveler, 13 carries, 79 yards, and a touchdown. He averaged 6.1 yards per carry every time he took off. I mean, realistically, they could have probably run him a lot more and still found success, because it seemed like every time he took off, he was picking up chunk plays, 5, 10, 15 yards every other play. And, I commented on it, and you actually kind of mentioned that you didn't think it was that bad, but, looking back at it now, box score wise, I didn't think he had 79 yards. I just thought it was a couple big plays here and there. But I mean, looking back, okay, yeah, now that I think about it, he ran it quite a bit. So, I mean, ultimately, that is a very concerning factor to a Redblacks defense moving forward. I mean, if you can't learn how to stop the run, we're going to have a hard time staying in games, because at the same time, our successful unit, or the most successful way we've been able to move the ball right now, is the running ball game. So, I mean, if we're eating clock on our side and then getting chewed up on the other side as well, it's not going to bode well for Ottawa long term.
I think the thing that stood out to me the most in this game, though, was the key plays where it came from. Like, I feel like Strevler did a ton of damage on first down, but it was the big second downs. Like, take a look at Brady Oliveira. 5 receptions for 37 yards, but his yards after catch were 36. I mentioned in the chat that coming out of halftime, the fact that Ottawa still hasn't found a way to stop the short passing game from killing them, it led to 2 first downs on 1 drive for Oliveira, right? Like, it was just a dump off. That's all it was. But it was open green field in front of him, and he made first downs on 2 first downs on a second down play. You take a look at Kevin's, right? Like 34, he had 13 yards after the reception. So, of his 34, almost half of them came off of, yards off the yak, right? So those smaller plays, because Strevler only averaged 6 yards per catch, right? But those plays were the plays that ended up hurting them. And what are small plays considered of? The short passes considered of? An extension of the run game, right? So not only did they run over you, you also didn't do anything to stop this short passing game from getting key first downs, right?
Exactly.
So Ottawa needs to clean that up. They need to find a way maybe to be more aggressive, maybe target a little bit more, play a little more man-to-man on the short yardage, because if you don't trust your back half, then why'd you spend all that money? Like that's the biggest thing. You spent that money on that defense. Don't all of a sudden shy away from it and act like you're not confident in it. That's just my biggest takeaway from this particular game involving Ottawa. Good win for Winnipeg, because they were really struggling going into this game, but I think they kind of just fell into it. Like, that's all. That's all I have for that game.
That's fair. I mean, honestly, I was going to point this out, but I mean, Winnipeg did win this game, but I mean, it wasn't pretty by any stretch. I mean, you see right there, they had to finish 6 drives with field goal attempts. That's 18 points from their 25 that came from Sergio Castillo. So,
Yep.
I mean, there's something missing from the Winnipeg offense, so they can't finish these drives. And, maybe it changes when Claros comes back, if he comes back. He wasn't playing that great before he left, but it is kind of crazy to see Winnipeg win games and it not be in decisive fashion like it was, the past couple seasons. I think we mentioned this once before, but I think it's been a decade since they've had a losing season. So, I mean, this is just abnormal, and I do expect them to finish with a winning season, to be clear, but to see them struggle like this out the gate is just surprising, to say the least.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it was something that stuck out to me, was Ottawa's red zone defense was really, really stout, and they should be really, really happy with how that played out. And as far as Winnipeg is concerned, a lot of new faces, right? They had a lot of turnover in certain key pieces. Like, I've always watched the football from the inside out, because that's just the way that I am. Everybody else likes to watch the quarterback and receivers. I watch the game from the line out. So my eyes first come onto the line on pass plays and then stretch out to the quarterback. Most people just watch the quarterback from the snap of the ball. So Winnipeg definitely has some gelling that they need to do, especially on that offensive line. It's probably the weakest performance that I've seen through a season for a Winnipeg team since I started watching in 2018. So that's for 6 years of watching CFL action, and right now this is the weakest I've seen for performance-wise on the offensive line. So whether that's Collaros needing to adjust his protection or whatnot when he comes back, or the coaches just continuing to put faith into guys that maybe need a little more time to develop. I'm not sure, but I hope that they figure it out, because I think the league is better when Winnipeg is better.
You're not wrong.
Even though I don't like them, and even though I like parity, I just feel like the league is always better when you're talking about Winnipeg, Toronto, and the rivalries involved with those guys, and then the other teams that are on the up and up, like Montreal was last year, like we expected Ottawa might be this year, Calgary, BC. I don't know what's going on with Hamilton. That's just a different story, I guess. But
yeah, it is kind of interesting to see what's going on in Hamilton. But there is one more subject that I wanted to get to on this game in particular, and that is not the right one. Willie Jefferson. You have
finally,
been very critical of the fact that he's been very quiet so far this season, but he had a very big sack, forced fumble, and recovery all in one play, and it turned the tide of this game, obviously. So, I mean, there he was, like you said,
finally.
yeah.
Finally. And I don't know if it's been Willie Jefferson, or if it's just been scheme, or if it's just been the lack of other playmakers on this defensive line. I'm not sure. I can't attest it, but they had zero pass rush until this game. Like, it was literally you and I could have sat back there and played quarterback, and I'm fat and out of shape, right? Like, I don't know how athletic you are to play quarterback, but I feel like we could have had success playing quarterback back there, because there was just no pass rush for the first 4 or 5 weeks. So it's interesting to see how Willie Jefferson has been kind of a ghost through the first 4 weeks, and then he made his presence felt like a poltergeist, right? We need more poltergeist every week and less ghost, basically. And that's just, if you don't know the difference between the two, you should look it up.
Gotcha. I'll have to look that up later then.
Poltergeists are usually angry spirits. That's what they.
Oh, I was totally kidding, but
okay.
yeah, looking back at the Calgary Montreal game, which is the next one on last week's list, we might have the blueprint for why Toronto was so adamant about Cameron Dukes running the ball this past weekend, or this past tonight's game. You look right there, Tommy Stevens tore it up. He had one pass attempt for 24 yards, but he also had 6 carries for 49 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. He ended up becoming, I believe, the 17th quarterback this season to throw a pass by this game. So,
yep.
It's kind of crazy that we're already at that number, but I have a feeling that we might see more added to that number by the end of this weekend.
I don't think it's as crazy as people think it is, because a lot of these second quarterbacks do see more playing time than normal, and you have to have a pass option in that. You can't just be like, it's going to be a run every time, because you have to be able to try to catch the defense off guard and surprise them, right? Like, that's just the way that it is. But as you could tell by Jake Mayer's numbers, you couldn't pass on Montreal in this game. But this game alone, though, was a testament to Calgary not finishing. This game was 26-15 in the fourth quarter. They got shut out in the fourth. And their defense couldn't stop anybody because they got shut out, because that offense couldn't stay on the field. I don't know if they got away from Tommy Stevens, why they got away from Tommy Stevens in the fourth. I feel like he could have extended drives to lead, Montreal into a situation. And then Mayer threw that late fourth quarter interception that just, kind of sealed it for Montreal. But it was literally the fourth quarter issue. And I don't know why Calgary abandoned what was working. And that's the thing I think that's more mind-boggling than anything else, because it just, Peyton Logan, Tommy Stevens, even BJ Emmons had some success running the ball. So stick with it. I don't understand why you only have, what did they end with? 6, 12, 17, 19, 21 carries spread out. So, yeah. You're muted, Sam. So whatever it is you're saying, nobody can hear you.
Sorry about that. And I apologize about the background noise. But yeah, so I agree. I mean, obviously, we were just ran down the play there. Tommy Stevens didn't have any fourth quarter carries, and you had the lead going into the fourth quarter. Like, what are you doing at that point? Especially considering the fact that your run game has been working amazingly all game long. You see it right there: 8.2 yards per carry, 10.8 for Peyton. Jalen Philpott got in there, 5.5, and yards per carry for him as well. So I mean, like, why did you get away from that? That you could have easily picked up a win had you just continued to run, Tommy Stevens and Peyton Logan there.
Like, if you take a look at Jake Mayer's numbers, obviously the passing game wasn't working. So it really just feels like that this was just a coach not understanding the trend of what was happening, in comparison to coaches who do pay attention to the trends and make adjustments off of that. In-game adjustments are very, very hard to establish, but if you do it right, it works. And I feel like Calgary did not do that in this game. And then you take a look at Montreal. Cody Fajardo threw the ball 42 friggin' times, went for 374, but he completed 35 of those. So he had 2 interceptions in the case, but it just goes back to Montreal's secondary was playing much, much better than Calgary's was. So you had a lead, knowing you were being outplayed and that this team can score on a whim. Why are you not running the ball? So kudos to Montreal for another hard-fought victory here in this game. They should have lost. It should have been a loss. You're muted again.
Completely agree. I honestly, I just, like I said, I'm baffled at why they would get away from Tommy Stevens there at the end. But it's one of those coaching decisions where he'll probably look back on that for a long time and kick himself for not just continuing to roll with what worked. But hey, at the end of the day, maybe there's something we don't know. I am not privy to the Hamilton Tiger Cats injury report at the moment, so maybe Stevens got banged up there at the end. I didn't catch that. So
honestly, it just may have been they didn't want to be one-dimensional, but it was the only dimension that was working for you. So lean into what's working for you at the time.
100% agree. One of the big storylines that was going to be for last week was Dennis McKnight is hired as the special teams coordinator for the Tiger Cats. They fired their previous coordinator, a week ago, and it decided to hire McKnight this past week. McKnight was most recently with the XFL. His team was removed in the merger, so now he finds a new position with Hamilton. Looking back at this past game, though, he might have wished he waited one more week. BC is looking like they are possibly one of the best teams in any league. Right now, Vernon Adams is playing quarterback like it should be played. And realistically, the Lions are just rolling. I'm very excited to watch this upcoming week's game with Saskatchewan and BC because I think it's going to be a great one. But what were your thoughts on this game?
Justin McInnes is a dog. Plain and simple. There is no other way to explain it. Vernon Adams gets all the credit in the world. What McInnes is doing, like, it was Alexander Hollins. It's been Alexander Hollins, I should say, for a good chunk of the year, and he still had a great game. But Justin McInnes it has been showing out, and I don't know where it's come from. Don't care. I'm just loving it for the ride that I'm on with BC when they're on the field. However, are they too dependent on big plays? That's the question. If they get into a grind out, because they lost week 1, I think it was to Calgary.
It might have been
week 1. And that game was dirty and gritty and grimy, and it was not a pretty game. And when the big plays aren't there and the flash is not there for you, is it sustainable? So BC really needs to find a way to dirty it up. as weird as that sounds, like they can't continue to stay flashy. However, it's working. Hamilton, on the other hand, though, I don't know. Bo Levi Mitchell looked great in the first 2 weeks, and he still played well. It's just the rest of this team. I don't know. Like that those are good numbers, if it's from a statistic standpoint. But why is it falling apart? And most of it's the lack of run game, possibly. I don't really know, because I feel like Hamilton ran the ball really well the week before this and still lost. So they don't have an identity, I guess, is the other thing. Like, I guess their identity is Bo Levi Mitchell. I don't really know what to call it. So they need to find something that works, because right now it's not.
Completely agree. I mean, for some odd reason, again, something's just missing in this offense. And I think part of it is that lack of a run game. We can try and substitute screen passes for run plays all game long. There's just times and situations where you have to have a run game, and the fact that you can lean on play action is huge for your offense, especially in the passing game. It opens up a lot of passing lanes. It draws those linebackers up. There's a million different reasons we could get into why it's productive, but you see that they use James Butler a lot in that screen game, trying to get him involved. I mean, obviously 9 receptions, 108 yards, 66 came after the catch. So the vast majority of those were, little 5-yard dump offs that he took, and it took the distance. So, I mean, it's a situation where they really have to get that run game going, no matter what it takes, even if it is, going out and trying to make a trade, or, sign a recent NFL free agent or something. I mean, there's got to be something that you can do to get this running game going. And honestly, that's part of the problem with BC, I think, as well. They have Steinbach, and he is doing okay. But at the same time, this isn't the same William Steinbach that we watched in Montreal that was consistently getting near that 100-yard mark. So I think that's part of what BC needs to get going as well. Kind of ironic that both teams need to work on their run game, but this is definitely one of the situations where I think that's the issue on both of these offenses.
Well, I mean, Steinbach was all right in this game against Hamilton, but Hamilton's defense hasn't been able to stop the run, so it's not really a huge surprise to see Steinbach go for 5.9 yards per carry. Hamilton, Tim White, it's weird. He had 12 targets but only 5 receptions, and week 1 he had 3 crucial drops in week 1, and then another big drop in week 2. Like, I don't know what's going on with Tim White right now, but Hamilton needs him. They can't not have him be performing. I know Bo Levi Mitchell and the coaching staff came to his defense, but he's hurting them. So until something can come together with him and Levi Mitchell, I don't know what is going to happen. Like I said, this is an identity team that I don't really know what they are. And Bo Levi can't do everything. He's getting too old for that.
You're not wrong. And, I mean, it's a situation where they definitely got to get this figured out rather quickly, especially with Tim White. I mean, he is one of the top receivers on this team. If they can't find chemistry there, I mean, there isn't a whole lot, outside of him. I mean, I know they've got Shamar Bridges and a couple other players that have played, but White's kind of your guy. I mean, he's supposed to be one of the top receivers on this team, and he just hasn't had that chemistry for whatever reason. And it really has been it's been odd to watch, and it's been a multi-week thing. It's not just this game either.
Yeah, I don't know of those 12 targets, the 5 receptions. I don't know how many of those targets were considered, catchable targets. But regardless of it, like 5 for 12 is not an efficient number at all, and it's not pretty when you see it. So you know, it is what it is, and maybe they'll get it figured out, but I don't know. They're gonna have to do something because the league is gonna leave them behind, basically.
I would agree. So a couple other subjects to touch on before we get out of here for the night, and one of the big ones that we did not get a chance to discuss was the fact that Sean Lemon has been immediately suspended, and as far as we know, he will not be able to return anytime soon. So I'm curious what your reaction is to that. I mean, obviously, we kind of had a feeling this was coming at some point. But I'm curious, like, how big of an effect do you think this will actually have on Montreal?
I mean, you could maybe use tonight as an indicator, as a possible indicator. I don't know. It's hard because this Montreal defense is still pretty good. I mean, I know they gave up 30 plus tonight, but overall, I still think they're pretty good. I don't know. It's hard. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the impact is going to be, but they're going to feel an impact, right? It's just a matter of, is it a 1 week impact? Is it a 2 week impact? Or is it a 7 week impact, right? Like right now, the first week's out of the way. So we know we got 1 week out of it because I feel like it was definitely an impact in this game tonight that he wasn't there. However, defensive linemen luckily are extremely talented, and it's a fairly deep pool to be able to find somebody maybe not as talented as Sean, but that is able to come in and produce right in a role or depth play. So if Montreal can find somebody that can step in and do that and start and make key plays when it matters, it will soften the blow. But impact defensive linemen are hard to find. So even with as deep as it may be, the impact will be felt. Is it responsible for what happened tonight? We'll have to see what happens the next couple weeks.
Absolutely. I don't necessarily think that it's the entire reason they lost tonight is a factor. Yes, I think it was.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something to watch moving forward with Montreal. I mean, if they start losing games left and right, all of a sudden we know how important he really was. But keep in mind, if I'm remembering correctly, he actually signed a couple weeks into the season, or a couple weeks late at least. After they had already kicked off the season. So they weren't originally intending to have Sean Lemon on their roster this season. So maybe it's a situation where we just don't see it being that big of a deal.
Oh no, he played week 1.
Did he? Okay,
Yeah, he played week
1. I'm mistakenly remembering it incorrectly, but I thought he had joined the team late, or rather late. I mean, it might have been just after training camp at that point.
Yeah, he may have joined it late from a training camp standpoint, but he played week 1 because one of the biggest talks was about him being able to play because he had the appeal going at the time. So
that's a good point. Well, on to the next little bit of news we did not get to cover last week. Sean Oakman has been signed by the Edmonton Elks. I actually thought Ottawa was on his list of teams, given the fact that he is one of those Toronto Argonaut players that did not return or was released, I guess you could say. So I expected him to land with Ottawa, much like many other Toronto Argonauts have recently. But he ends up with Edmonton. What's your immediate reaction to this one?
He's an impact player. Didn't he retire though? I feel like he retired or stepped away. No, maybe it wasn't him. No, maybe it wasn't him. He's an impact player. It just makes me wonder why he's signing late. Is there something with medical? Is it something that
he was carried into at least week 1 with Toronto, and then they released him after week 1.
Yeah,
we signed him this offseason.
But that's what I mean, though, is like why was he signed so late into from that standpoint? Why wasn't it week 2? I don't know. It's strange because Oakman is an impact player, so I think it's a great move for Edmonton because they've been in a lot of close games, right? So they need to try to find an edge for something to help them get over the hump, right? Like that's just the key. Derek Moncrief, nobody, that's another one up there. The linebacker, he was a staple in that Saskatchewan defense forever. Like he's a linebacker that could fly sideline to sideline. So them being able to sign him too. I mean, those are two impactful players right off the jump that could come in and hopefully keep those close games from tilting in favor one way or the other, right? Like that's essentially what they're trying to do. And they signed a defensive lineman as well. I think Noah Taylor played at UNC. So they definitely are trying to shore up this defense to keep those close games from coming back and biting them, essentially.
Obviously, I mean, they realized that they've got to do something if they want to change their recent fortunes, because it really hasn't gotten any better since last season, despite the fact that they made a lot of moves this offseason to try and shore up multiple areas on that team. But now, yeah, I mean, it's kind of surprising to see them where they're at right now. They have had a lot of very close losses this offseason, or this season so far, and it's been kind of tough to watch, and sometimes I like to chalk those close losses up to coaching, because at the end of the day, the coaching decision here and there, especially from Chris Jones, could have meant the world at the end of the game. So
I'm pretty sure we talked a little bit about some of the coaching decisions that were baffling by him already in multiple times this year. So I have a feeling that we'll be talking about his blunders more as the season goes on. So
I completely agree. And coming up on our last topic, I think it actually is our last topic for the night, is this big bomb that Dave Naylor dropped earlier today. A significant change at MLSE, which is obviously the company that owns the Toronto Argonauts and also the Toronto FC Soccer Club, have mutually agreed to part ways with their president, and now that he will be replaced by Keith Pulley. So interesting to see this in the middle of the season, especially given the fact that the Argonauts have had so much success recently. I almost have to wonder if this isn't tied to the Chad Kelly situation. Again, I don't have any inside information, so I have no idea here, but to me, that's the only thing that would make sense at this particular juncture.
I took this one or two ways. Like the first thought was obviously, is this tied to Chad Kelly? Like that was my first thought process, because I feel like anything that's dealing with Toronto as a whole, you have to wonder about the Chad Kelly situation, right? Because it wasn't, whenever you have a quarterback that's doing it, is it from an organizational standpoint as well, right? That's just the way it is, how it goes. But I also took this from a standpoint of maybe the performances that they have had, because it has been fairly underwhelming, even despite the wins. Maybe they felt like it was just time for a change. It's interesting to see. I'm not really sure why you would make this change. What is it, week 6 we're in, or was heading into week 6 or whatever? So I don't know why you'd make that change now. It didn't seem to affect the team today, and I mean, I don't know. It's a very strange, and I'm sure that we'll probably get more information over the next couple of days as to what happened.
Yeah, I thought the timing was the part that really threw me off. I'm like, okay, if this is related to Chad Kelly, why didn't this happen before the season?
Right.
Second of all, they have a game tonight. Why is this happening right now? Like that,
Yeah.
what? It just seems like a very odd timing. Like even if there was something egregious that we end up finding out, that why not wait till the day after the game? I mean, I guess if it is something really, really bad, maybe he knew more information than we thought about the Chad Kelly situation, and it comes to light that, he swept it under the rug or something. I have no idea. But, if it's something like that, then I guess I can understand not wanting to wait to move away from somebody like that. But I just have a hard time understanding the timing. It just seems very odd.
The only other thing is, at this time of year or this time of the season, is it is possible it may be personal, too. Hopefully it's not health related or whatever, but that's a possibility as well. Because it did say mutually agreed, so
You're right.
Maybe he asked for it because he needed to. Yeah, so I don't know. Mutually agreed might just be a soft and easy way to say you didn't have a choice. Who the hell knows? So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point. That's a good point. Mutually agreed to part ways. That's one of two things. Either it's a very nice way for the team to kind of make it a softer blow, like you said, to him being fired, or it's a situation where he really did have some reasons where he needed to step away and the team gave him that opportunity, without him having to just resign, which is nice. So I guess we'll find out, like you said, some more information as that comes. I mean, that one kind of shocked me today, so I wanted to make sure we covered that. But man, like you said, did not affect the team at all. They came out, they won the game, they did their business. And I would assume that it's not really going to be anything more than a speed bump the rest of the way they played tonight.
yeah, and he's been with Toronto before, so it's not like it's not like he's coming in as a fresh face to take over for Manning and all that stuff. Like he's been there before, so he knows the system or the organization, and he knows what to expect from an organizational standpoint. Um, you know, so I mean, Toronto, I don't expect to miss a beat because of a front office change, but that's a pretty weird and strange timing and pretty big change after 5 weeks. So
Agreed. It seems just, like I said, very odd timing. But real quick before we get out of here for the night, I want to get your predictions for the next 3 games. So we're just going to run down them. I mean, you can give me as much detail or as little as detail as you want. But we got tomorrow's game, Calgary at Winnipeg. Do you think Winnipeg gets their second win this weekend?
I think Calgary wins, and that's not just me being a fan. I think Mayer, despite last week's lack of performance overall, I think Mayer's shown signs of improvement. It was just a little speed bump last week. I expect him to rebound this week. Shrevler is not a startable. He's not a threat in the passing game, in my opinion. So if Calgary can find a way to kind of box him in or keep him somewhat contained in the run game, I think Calgary can win this game. So I'm gonna say Calgary 31, Winnipeg 21.
Okay. I had not thought as far ahead as a score. I did pick Calgary in our CFL News pickup this week, so I'm going to go ahead and stay consistent, say Calgary here as well. Man, I don't know if they get to 31 points, though. That's a lot.
I don't think Winnipeg is as good defensively as I don't know. I like this Calgary offense. So if Mills can get going, I like it better.
That's also fair. I'm going to go 24-17. So I still do think, like I said, Calgary wins, but I'm going to go 24-17. So if you're betting on this game, those are our opinions. We do not advise betting strictly on our opinions, although we have a pretty good record so far this year. I do not have it right in front of me, though. But in my opinion, the game of the week, which is, of course, the 4-1 BC Lions playing host to the 4-0 Saskatchewan Roughriders. Who do you have in this game?
My instinct tells me to take BC. I'm taking Saskatchewan. Not confident in it, though. It's not a confident pick at all because BC's offense is just so destructive. Saskatchewan, I feel, is in a good place, and they continue to believe in Corey Mace every week. It shows. Eventually, they will stumble. I do not expect them to go undefeated all year, and I'm not going to take them every week. This could be a week that they lose. That defense, though, is so opportunistic, and if Vernon Adams is off just a little bit, Saskatchewan will make them pay. I believe they lead the league in turnovers. I believe they lead the league in interceptions. This is going to be a close game, though. I'm going to say it might come down to a rouge. 29-28 Saskatchewan.
Okay. I actually picked Saskatchewan this week as well. Something about that Corey Mace magic down there. It strikes me as a team of destiny this year. Do they make it all the way to a Grey Cup victory in year one with him there? I don't think so, but until they lose, I'm going to go ahead and bet on them now. So I do think that this is going to be a really high scoring game. I don't know how Saskatchewan's going to manage to keep up with BC's offense, but I've got it as a 30-point game for Saskatchewan, which it's going to be creative. There's probably going to be some defensive scores in there, maybe a special team score for them to get there with Shea Patterson starting. But I've got 31 to let's go 31-20.
11-point victory. Okay.
We'll see. I mean, it might actually be closer than that, but this defense, we'll see. And the final game of this upcoming weekend is something of a very entertaining game because it could be a bad one. We got Ottawa at Edmonton. Edmonton is still defeated. They have not won a game, 0-4. Ottawa is 2-2. They're coming off a loss against Winnipeg. Who do you have in this one?
Edmonton. I hate it. Trust me, I hate it. It's just because I don't want Chris Jones to succeed at anything. But they have been involved in some really close games, and McLeod Bethel-Thompson's played really, really well. Ottawa has some things they need to figure out. However, Edmonton doesn't run the ball very well. So unless they find a way to get Kevin Brown involved, it could end up being very one-dimensional, and Ottawa could easily win this game. This is another close game on paper because of Ottawa's inability to run the ball. I mean, inability to stop the run, but Edmonton's inability to run the ball. So there's really no edge there. And because of that, I'm going to give it to the better of the two quarterbacks. Drew Brown coming off an injury. Is he really actually 100%? That's a question. Does Dustin Crum come in and provide the magic if he isn't, like we've seen? But I think Edmonton's going to win this game. McLeod Bethel-Thompson has been playing really well despite all the losses. So I'm going to say 27-23 Edmonton.
Okay. I actually picked Ottawa in our pick'em this week, and judging by the way it's gone so far this year, they are going to lose this game because every time I seem to pick them, they lose. When I don't pick them, they win. It's been really weird. But so I think Ottawa in this game is going to find some rhythm on offense with Drew Brown back. Man, I really like your score, actually. I'm not going to lie. But I do think they will get 27, but I think it's going to be 21 for Edmonton. And honestly, that I could see this being a game that Ottawa loses. I really do. I mean, Edmonton has been in a lot of close games, like you said, this year. It's only a matter of time before they figure out the difference between a loss and a win. So it could very well be this game. But 27-21, Ottawa, in my opinion. And just for anybody curious at home, real quick, here is the betting odds for this week. Give me just a sec. I'll pull that up a little bit bigger.
Oh, whoops. That was my fault.
There we go. So, we got Calgary versus Winnipeg. They are an underdog there. Or Winnipeg's an underdog. I'm saying that wrong.
No, Calgary's the underdog.
Calgary's the underdog. Thank you. Saskatchewan's the underdog. And down here at the bottom, I imagine Edmonton. No, Ottawa.
It's +3. It's they're equally matched home game goes to the home team. That's what the +3 means. Usually that means that they viewed it as a fairly evenly matched between the two teams, and they just usually, if that's the case, they just give it to the home team.
Yeah, it actually says over there on the corner markets +3, which I didn't notice. So it's
yep.
basically a half a point game. Basically.
I didn't see that either, but that's usually what it is. Yeah. So
interesting. So yeah, definitely should be a great game. I mean, it's going to be an entertaining game. It may not be a great game. It'll be interesting to see who comes out of this one with a victory. Any final thoughts before we get out of here for the evening?
No, I love this, one game a day thing that they've been doing, and go Calgary.
There you go. I love it. No, I completely agree about the one game a day thing. I personally think that it's probably inflating their streaming numbers so far, I would imagine, given the fact that everybody has at least one game they can watch each day. And if people aren't going to watch all 4 games, they're probably not going to try and watch any of the other games other than their team. But, for the guys that do want to watch every game, they have ease of access. So I definitely think it's a great idea. Hopefully they keep it up for the rest of the season. I haven't looked that far through the schedule yet, but definitely think it's a good thing for the league.
They usually try to change it a little bit for the NFL season, because they don't usually have to run Thursday night games against the NFL. So
that would be fair. That would definitely be fair. So we definitely have at least a few more weeks then.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to change until. I don't think it will change until maybe the first week of the NFL season. It may change a little sooner depending on how they feel about preseason, but I don't think it's going to change until about the end of August, September.
You called it. Week 13, which is the last week of August, is when that changes. So week 12 is the last week with games on every day.
Yeah, see. they don't like to compete with the NFL season. It's smart. I understand it, but it does suck not having football from them every day.
I agree. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how things change kind of slightly when we get to that point. But that's a thought for another day. And real quick, I didn't play any of the commercials before, so we're going to go ahead and hit those at the outro, and we'll catch you guys next week. Normally Wednesday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern, so tune in next Wednesday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you guys right here. Have a good night.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school. This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I used to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be.